What's up? It's Rayne, and the first video of the day is going to be uh, my theme for Fridays used to be Science Fridays, but I think I want to go with something a little different and maybe do science stuff on sciencey things on Mondays. So what I'm going to talk about today is probably already been talked about, or has probably already been talked about quite a bit. So I'm going to mention just a little bit of it here to try and give you the synopsis of what's really happening in the sky above us, what really could be going on in the sky above us that we're not aware of or we can't see. Mostly because these objects themselves are transient in their existence in our reality, but are fluctuating in and out of our current frequency because we're coming up on a time in our present day history where these things existed in our past and were either locked in position for a certain period of time and are coming back into this realm of vibration where our frequency is dialing up. So the vibration that this equipment exists at is starting to come into our resonance. So we'll start to see these things as they start to slow down to our frequency or appear to slow down based on our perception. So what I'm talking about is a stargate. Now, a stargate in and of itself is not a fictional thing. It's not something that's portrayed as fiction by any sort of archaeological persona that has worked anywhere in the area of India surrounding Nepal. I'd say probably Egypt and parts of the Yucatan that are also related to this apparatus itself being discovered, both in its sandstone creation as a recreation of the original or a depiction of the original in stone that doesn't function, but is a remake of something that low humans saw the creator gods use. And through natural forces, these things are held in position. Now, the reason I say that they're natural is because what they were made from was essentially not refined metal, but kept into a stone form. So if its frequency is high enough, and at the moment it can, be, I guess, set to resonate a certain frequency vibration based on the stone's hewn quality, could create a magnetic field resonance within the object, especially in a circle form. If it's large enough, it could tap into a magnetic field that naturally occurs or is already here. The Earth's magnetic field is a good power source. What blah, 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 Tesla referred to as the ether is this same field. Now, the funny thing is about these stargates is that the ones that I've seen function through videos on YouTube, or the ones I've seen that look like they're in a functioning quality, in some videos do appear to be solar flares, or not solar flares, but lens flares. There we go, lens flares. Some of them do appear to be lens flares, and they're obvious lens flares, but some of them do, a very few of them do look seriously authentic. Now, not like they were a Photoshop or anything like that, but because I ran them through my program that looks at stuff like that and can tell if the photo or the image has been doctored or manipulated in any way. But they also have technology out now that can basically wash a edited photo to prevent any evidence of tampering be obvious, or beyond the obvious. What you could look for is smaller minutia parts of that photograph, evidence of it being doctored. It takes a lot longer, but you have to go over each pixel, or as far in as you can zoom into it on photo editor. Then you can see that there were manipulations done at the small level where they were covered almost expertly to the point where it has to be done by some sort of software to create this much of a cover up and it seemed real. But the photograph that I mentioned is from a video posted by Mr. BB333, or Yeah, MB333. That's Mike Romeo Mike Bravo Bravo 333 is his YouTube name. I've just checked out this video talking about the real Stargate next to the sun, and there's a picture that this woman took from her cell phone in Southern California, looking up at the sun. Now, the sun itself was at a roughly 35 to 40 degree angle from her position in the photograph, and facing the sun in the western end of the sky at that time of the day would probably put it around, let's see, well, it wouldn't be western at that time. She took the picture at 11 o'clock, so it would be 11 o'clock high on December, which would put it at about a 35 to 40 degree angle from the ground, and she would be able to see such an event through the appearance of a flat roof standing behind her house. If she was a fairly short person, she could see it. But the idea is that she took a series of pictures, and in one particular still, there is an obscure picture that shows. Okay, it's not an obscure as far as can't see it, but it's clouded with uncertainty and seems very obscure in its presentation, but it does favor a Stargate almost directly. Now, the reason I say almost directly is because of its depiction, the Stargate's depiction in the films, Stargate, the TV show, Stargate SG-1, Stargate Atlantis, all of those TV shows were talking about real history. Now, some of those shows, well, all of them take direction in art to do things differently to make it seem like it's fiction more than reality. Now, the show itself is fiction. Now, all the characters, the plot details, all the shit that goes on in the show is fiction. That's all scripted, and that's all built for your entertainment to hide the truth in plain sight. Now, the thing that functions like a Stargate inside the movie or in the TV shows is not a Stargate. That is technically a wormhole. Now, for those of you who are not aware, space is not a vacuum. It is a superfluid. Okay, there is density to space. Otherwise, there would not be suspension possibility in a total vacuum. It just doesn't work. Now, when you look at things in superfluid physiology and you go through that theory, then you can understand why the sun itself isn't hot, but is energetic. Now, it's electric and it's powered by a magnetic field that is also ran by a dynamo of things going on the inside of it that we don't yet understand, nor do we understand the center of our planet all that well. Now, there are some of us who think that the mantle is molten, that is like water. No. Okay. It is liquid or sort of liquid, I guess, or less dense and movable or viscous at that level at certain depths of our crust, but right next to the surface level, it is fairly fluid. It does move quite freely, which this is where you get your magma from, and it all occurs in the upper, lower, and middle mantle. Now, those are supposed and theorized layers. We haven't gotten deep enough to see what that is yet, or we haven't really understood the composition of said layers. But the liquid, more viscous form or area of the mantle is a very shallow pitch part of it. Now, that's a very shallow area. Now, the reason I say it's not deep is because the Earth is quite large and the mantle itself is quite thick, but the area in which the mantle is viscous or has a fluid-like consistency is very shallow compared to the rest of it, because the deeper you go, the higher the pressures get. And things do different things, materials do different things at different pressures. Now, it is my theory that when you go a little deeper than 40 feet, 50 feet into the mantle, you can't get any deeper. Not with conventional technology, not with drills, because the mantle then takes on a glass-like appearance and also a very plastic-like nature that you can't get through it, not even with a diamond tip blade. There's no way you can get through that, not with conventional drills. You need something different. Now, different modus of operandi at that point, I would say. I wouldn't go any further than talking through fictional things at that point, saying laser beams or whatever could be, possible, but that actually could be possible. So it just depends on the intensity of the laser beam, what you're going to use it for, and what effect it could have on the planet. Because if the nature of the mantle is in fact a glassy nature, that means that light can travel through it. So whatever you're going to do with a laser beam at that level needs to be specific, and it needs to be brief, whatever it is. It can't be something constant or something you're going to use for any long duration of time, just long enough to get deep enough to send in a probe that could drill itself around and check things out, or at least look into the part of the mantle where you can see all the way through. Because I'm sure there's a position at that point where you can see right to the other side of the planet. The other end of the stopping of the glassy nature of the mantle does occur at a certain depth, so it would seem glassy, like the internal workings of a clock. You could see into it, but when you're standing on edge of one of the gears, you can't see past it. The same thing that occurs on the inside of a glass ball. You can see the edges on the outside. From wherever you're viewing it at, you can see through, but you're seeing the edges or the stopping point at which the glass ends. So basically, what the pressures do to certain things, like we know that high pressure and carbon and heat creates diamonds. We also know that there are geodes inside the earth that are large crystalline pockets that are made of gypsum and certain salts and minerals. When you get down into the cave itself, the geode, it's crystalline in nature. You can see right through some of the solid stone, and it looks like glass. Now, it would stand to reason that at certain pressures, these elements also occur inside the mantle, but in a much more condensed and much more clear and pure representation of the material itself, because everything we use is surface. Everything we've ever used has been surface. Other parts of the mantle that has popped up from tectonic movement or through previous Earth destructions and or battles, whatever, something huge happened here. We created, what do you call it? Pyrite. We created, what else was made from destruction? Let's see, impact glass, of course. Nuke glass, whatever you want to call it like that. But it only takes a certain heat level for this interaction to occur, for the metal or the element to appear glassy in nature. It only takes a certain amount of heat for that to occur. So it would stand to reason that this also is how the magnetic field is generated from the inside of the planet, because heavier metals fall into denser categories, which fall down into the deeper parts of any planetary body in its molten form or formation. So that would mean that the planet itself has heavier elements at its core, which is why the magnetic field is so darn strong. Through some experimentation using sonar and radar technology going through the Earth, they have found that it's most likely that the core of our planet is iron, or mostly iron. And the core of the sun is mostly hydrogen or helium. And that's a pretty good synopsis of what things are made from by those two guesses. I would say hydrogen, helium could be part of the makeup of the sun. Could be completely wrong. You don't really know if you're right or not, because we can't get close enough to find out. We can see through colored wavelengths that come out in the spectrometer that give us the idea of what chemicals could be present, both in their presentation on our planet and their presentation through the color of the sun. But that does not mean they're the same minerals or the same materials. That means they could be, not that they are. The reason I say that is because the materials presented on our planet are in one pressure, or in one particular vibration, one particular pressure, and one particular area of the planet that exists where you can see it in that state. How it exists or occurs in a star is going to be different because of its pressure, its heat, and its size, and its age are all going to have effects on what chemicals or colors the sun gives off that you can see and guess at what it's made from. Hydrogen and helium are a good guess, but I don't think it's actually hydrogen and helium. Okay, I think the sun itself is entirely made from gold. Now, the center of the sun itself may be purely gold. Now, the outside edges could be different minerals, different material, or whatever that functions very much like a conductor. Now, The sun itself would be made from gold because of its color. It would appear like it's made from a gold or a very, 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 very hyperconductive metal that rests within the center of the planet. So helium at a metal state and pressure, liquid helium or liquid metal helium, liquid metal hydrogen, those two things could exist at the center of the sun and be creating the dynamo of the magnetic energy we experience as heat. Could be created in the center of the planet. So it's not far off saying that the sun is, well, a star, that it is also a planet, because it's just the same as everything else. It's just different materials gathered in one particular different spot that created a glowing atmosphere and a glowing surface, as opposed to a solid, more rocky body like Earth. So planet, star. But their function in layers is pretty much the same. So I don't want to get away from that explanation. I want you to understand the convection currents that occur in the sun are the same as, or they do present themselves in layers similar to the layers of the Earth. They're not exactly the same because of their function and their consistency and their chemical makeup. They're not the same. Now, the reason I say they're not is because they're both presented in different forms. You know, the Earth itself is a solid or more solid appearing body than the sun. The sun itself appears to be fluid or liquid or possible gaseous state, that it could be something we can go right through it and, you know, never hit anything solid. But there is also the possibility that there's a semi-solid core that is liquid metal at a very, very high pressure, where all the heat exists in this star is at the middle. Now, it's generated through electromagnetic energy. So the heat dissipation through the atmosphere of the sun is going to be great. It's going to dissipate a lot of heat through that atmosphere. Now, when it reaches the coronal mass at the outside of the sun, that is where the heat stops. There is no heat past the light. So if you're able to block out all the sunlight from your approach to the sun, the area behind you will be ice cold. There will be no atmospheric phenomena that would give you a heated atmosphere that close to the sun, even using something that blocked out all the light. So there are polymers that exist that can do this. What do they call it? Sterilite is one of the ones that could block this solar radiation quite well. And if you coat a probe or a craft with this said polymer, then you can take this craft close to the sun, like right up against it, and you would never feel the lick of the heat that would come from experiencing the bright, bright light of the host star of our solar system. Now, the reason the host star is so hot is because of its chemical makeup. Now, there are stars that are hotter than the sun, that give off more or higher frequency of light than the sun does. So we experience heat differently with a different light. So a different frequency in a vibration gives off a different resonance and a different wavelength pattern, which impacts the oxygen or atmosphere differently. That creates higher heat or lower heat, depending upon its variability in our atmosphere and the thickness of our atmosphere. So our atmosphere has levels to it. Each gradient level does compose of different masses of chemicals and compounds that prove different densities at different levels. So at the surface level of our planet, we have the densest, most common parts of our atmosphere: oxygen, carbon, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, helium, whatever. Those things do exist in our lower atmosphere. Now, that creates a denser field. So it would stand to reason, logically, that the atmosphere is hotter at the surface than it is at the apex. So that means at its exit point in the ionosphere, where all the charged particles exist and where HAARP has the most effect on heating the atmosphere, the solar rays come through our atmosphere, bounce off the surface of the Earth, and they get trapped at lower levels because it's denser there. So it gets warmer where the rays are trapped. So, which is why certain colors of paint on your car, certain colors of clothes you wear retain more heat and others do less. The reason that exists and it happens that way is because the sun is a colored object and it emits light of all colors. Now, there's not much of a wavelength pattern you can't see in the sun, but the ones that aren't present are the ones that just aren't there. So the wavelength pattern that goes through mass spectrometry can show you what the sun is made of and what it isn't, based on its colored light that comes from that. It gives you I guess, a marker of that chemical. Now, that's how they do their guesses as to what the sun's made from, largely of, hydrogen, helium, and the rest, and so on and so forth is on the list. It's on, you can check it out, soho.com or NASA.com, of course, and see their chemical list there. I don't know how well you can trust it, but I know it is present on their website. Anyway, the two main contenders were hydrogen and helium, so you don't really need to know much other than that, because those are the two most important things in the chemical compound of the sun. The rest of it, I believe, are off-gassing chemicals that are as a result, or used or created as a result of the fusion process, or the pulsing process inside the sun that creates electric energy or magnetic field energy created by the hydrogen and helium in the middle. Now, the reason we see most of that is because of its transference. Now, I know that that is kind of a hard concept to gather, so I won't go too deep in that. If I want to get back to the Stargate topic I was talking about before, but I had a lot to explain in between that would give you some understanding. Now, the process of the thicker, denser atmosphere that we create has a ability to create a static charge to the surface. Each level has a different frequency and has a different viability in that frequency range and or chargeability. So when you're at the surface, you have a higher charge. When you're away from the surface, the farther you go, the charges vary and they sort of blanket the atmosphere. When you reach the ionosphere, it starts going the other direction. They get harder and higher frequency at the equatorial region around the planet, also known as the Van Allen radiation belts. That's a very highly magnetic zone that is dangerous to humans because of our magnetic field we generate ourselves is interfered by that when we pass through it. It could render you dead, pretty much. Which is why NASA claims to now divert all of their craft around the magnetic field or around the Van Allen radiation belts rather than through them. Now, it doesn't kill you immediately, that passing through this much radiation, but it does reverse your polarity. Now, the reason I say that's important is because every human is basically a conductor. Okay, you have two legs, right? One on each part of the ground. There's a connection, and there's a reason for that. Because your magnetic flow does occur through those arcs in your body. Now, if you look at a human body under the meter in which to use to measure your magnetic field generation, basically like an EM recorder, you can take this information and see it in a pictorial view or present it in a picture where it shows that a person has an aura expressing from them, but it's an arc from one foot to the what you call the bottom chakra, or the sacral chakra, I should say. Sacral chakra, there we go. From the foot to the sacral to the other foot, and it passes straight through to the ground, and that is your magnetic field that is joined with the earth. Now, when you leave the earth and pass through this magnetic field or Van Allen radiation belt, the poles are flipped because you come outside the magnetic distance between the surface and the edge of our atmosphere, which it does flip poles there because that's the edge of the leading edge of our magnetic field of the earth is also very shallow at the front end. Now, when you go out equatorially, you can't get through it. You'll travel for a long period through the magnetic field and you can reach the moon or something like that and never leave our Earth's atmosphere. That's how it is possible to go to the moon with a manned spacecraft, is through the shadow of the Earth, where the edge of the Earth that isn't facing the sun, the magnetic field stretches out past the moon. So you can actually go to the moon straight shot from Earth from that angle and never pass through the Van Allen belts because they're stretched out beyond where there would be an impactful detriment to anyone on board, at least to a certain degree. You could go rather equatorial launch and go straight out. Now, the problem with the Van Allen belts themselves is once they're back into their normal position around the Earth where the moon isn't affecting it, then this could also strengthen or heighten the magnetic field resonance and frequency depending upon its position between the Earth and the sun and which phase it is in. So that also needs to be taken into account when you're planning a launch from that area, because the phase of the moon plus the phase of the sun where, I mean, not the phase of the sun, but the position of the sun and the phase of the moon are very important to base yourself in this launch area. But the reason this is possible is because they use technology to map out the magnetic field of the Earth. Now, when they were doing this experimentation and using this technology, they discovered certain things that were particularly interesting about the surface of the Earth. We had nodal points, or places on the Earth where the energy is stronger and parts of it that are weaker, also known as ley lines, that where they intersect is called a nodal point. Now, these energetic portals or ley lines that are on our planet, where they intersect, everywhere they intersect along a certain line of latitude, there are pyramids built. There are structures built in this area on specific locations, dead center to one of these nodal points, every single pyramid. Now, the reason they were built in that fashion is because they were harnessing the Earth's magnetic energy with these resonance generators. Now, the Grand Pyramid is also a magnetic field and a wireless electricity generator because it was used as a what do they call it? Hydraulic pressurized generator. Hydraulically pressurized because the water beneath the pyramid created a vibration inside the pyramid, like a resonant frequency vibration that bounced up through the stone. And when you get to the Queen's Chamber, the vibration, or the bottom of the area built right beneath the Queen's Chamber, are singing stones. Now, the center of the Queen's Chamber, the part that walks up to that area, the Grand Gallery that leads up to the Queen's Chamber, that is where the resonators were. Now, they're nothing but large tuning forks, okay, with probably clay pots on a barb in the middle to collect all the frequency and focus it upward. Now, these things were present all the way up the Grand Gallery, leading up to the Queen's Chamber, where the main chemical reaction that was poured in with heavy metals, zinc, and whatever other things they used to get that going. I can't remember what the other chemical was, but I know it was an acid. But they used these two things together in concert with the water beneath it, creating a magnetic field from the inside, generating a chemical reaction, which created, what do they call it? Microwaves coming out of the top of the pyramid, pointed to a certain direction in the sky. It could very well be used to power something wirelessly. Now, the reason I say that this is probably why the stargates are visible in certain areas of the sky and they're not is because these pyramids are still giving off this energy. Thousands of years after they were supposedly discovered, these pyramids act on their own. They need no interference from outside sources. They don't need you to do anything. The only reason the one in the Cairo, Egypt, the large one, the Grand Pyramid, the one with no markings on the inside, is not functioning is because there's no water beneath it. If they were to re-irrigate that part of the pyramid, then it would come back on with the capstone in place. Because it was nothing but a giant battery. And if people don't realize that, you're going to miss the entire next part of what I'm saying. The pyramids were built to help sustain these stargates. Now, when they did this traveling capability, or the traveling capability of our ancient people, was insanely futuristic and instantaneous. Now, you can jump through a stargate and be the other side of the galaxy or universe in seconds, depending on where you want to go. That's the part of the use of the stargate is to dial in certain areas and use a locus using the star charts or whatever on the actual stargate itself. But there are other ways to travel. We don't really know how they would use it because they aren't functioning in a way that we can understand it today. We know that they had a brief theory of it or a speculation of how it was used or how it functioned in the movie Stargate, but those, again, were wormhole frames, not stargates. Stargates themselves do not have a watery appearance at the center because they're located in space. So you would not have a watery appearance to the front of the Stargate on the surface of the planet because Stargates cannot exist on the surface. Wormhole frames can. Wormhole frames are smaller and are less invasive to the outer atmosphere, I would say, and less evasive to space or whatever, because it depends on where you're putting up your other end. Now, they have to have 2 points selected before this apparatus can work or function. So, what the original pioneers of space travel had to do was go from point A to point B manually. Now, when they got to a different system, they reached a different class M planet, to use some Star Trek lingo there. Or some scientific lingo, a class M planet where humans could live. Possible environment for our existence is called a class M or Terra planet. Similar to Terra, basically. Um, okay. Now, the planet itself, if it's a class M planet, it's going to have an atmosphere similar to ours, which it would, be similar to Earth in more than one presentation. Probably has life forms on it, or wildlife, maybe. Now, if this planet exists, then they would travel from their home world to this planet manually using whatever technology they have. It's still probably fairly quick because they have this ability to suspend a stargate through a magnetic field resonance frequency between the Earth and the host star to give it a good jump start between where they are and where they want to go. Like they could just pass through the stargate from that point forward in mass transit, and you can invade. Now, these sorts of gates are being used now that are between the Earth and the Sun, because our sun and our planet have been visited for a long time, and they used to be more heavily visited. And when they had supposed wars that occurred in space or the sky above us, in the heavens, whatever, these battles were recorded in history, and it was said that they came from the sky, or they'd come out of the sun, basically, into view. If you listen to a lot of the older stories of creation myths and things like that, especially Sumerians, they had a very deep creation myth, and it went really, really convoluted to a point where it's like, oh my God, too much information. Ultra HD, right? You can look through all of that crap and you can see everything. But coming away from Sumeria, you get into India, and they also did the same thing with their history. They report a massive war that occurred in the heavens through the use of vimanas, or flying craft, and they had space age style weapons that used certain colored orbs or whatever. It was a lot of crazy looking crap that was depicted there. But that's also in our history. And they even supposed that the gods themselves used flying craft that came to them from the sky through the use of these gates. Now, the only place where the gates were ever used in any prevalence and even recorded in stone was in Egypt and Nepal, that really put up the most accurate to the movie looking stargates, if you're going by the movie's depiction of a stargate. But the actual stargate is not a stargate. Okay, so the ones that are in the movies are not stargates. They're wormhole frames. That was also theorized by Einstein to be possible if you used magnetic ore and functioned it, or machined it in such a way it would resonate a certain frequency. You could dial into a certain period of the past or future using a wormhole frame. And those things already exist. Now, the problem with the communication loss between these objects and the surface and whatever, we can't see them now, is because they're dilated in a different frequency. Okay, if you are using technology that the ancients used, then the Earth would resonate at a different frequency, and we would see them. They would come into view, because we're a low vibration right now. And the reason I say the Earth is at a low vibration is because it's coming up in its vibration. That's evident in the amount of earthquakes and the amount of vibration we see going on around us. The sounds people are hearing, the sound, the low frequency sound wave that traveled through the planet. It was also a keynote of Operation, Ascension, my friends. So it's going up in vibration to the point where we can actually get back to where we were, right around 240,000 years ago. I would say it's possible that it's been even longer than that. But once we see these objects again, then nothing we have currently will function anymore. It'll all have to be done through passive electronics. And the government knows this. NASA may be hiding some stuff as well, but the government does know and is aware of the frequency change and what will happen. Now, they're trying to point it out as it's going to be a natural disaster and they're going to fake some sort of alien invasion or whatever. But the real ones that were here thousands of years ago are coming back. And the reason I say they're coming back is because they never left. Now, the point that I'm trying to make here is that these beings are not real. Okay, they're not real. Okay, if I say that correctly, they are very, very much real, and they are in a different vibration frequency than we are because their resident time frame is different from ours. So their plane of existence fluctuates in and out of our dimension because of the resonant frequency. Vibrations do hide things from us. Now, when you get away from the realm of normal frequency into the realm of the possible use where stargates can exist, then you understand that the mechanisms used are mostly magnetic and it is naturally occurring energy, not using anything we currently understand as technology. The use of these objects is completely done through resonant frequency and vibration. So they know what to do when they're left without an operator. So it's simple. This object is held suspended in the sky, not in our atmosphere, but far enough away from our planet for a craft to come through it. And it's in correlation with the sun because it's suspended using that connection between the earth and the sun. Now, anywhere on the planet and outside our atmosphere can be used in this manner because each part of it has a certain resonant frequency in the magnetic field. In that realm, you can suspend this kind of material in the sky between you and the sun and travel through it to a different dimension or a different part of the universe, which would actually effectually be a dimension you folded in on the other side of the Stargate. That's a Stargate. But if you don't have the proper technology, you just go right through it. You didn't go anywhere. Okay, you just passed through a ring. You have to have something that interacts with the object itself to make it snap to its proper use or what it would be used for. And when it's in that fluctuation or when it's in flux, then it is invisible. And the reason it's invisible is because of its resonant frequency. That's the only reason. So if you change the frequency vibration, change the dilation, you get a different presentation of its ability to be seen or observed in real time and real space. So yeah, we're getting there. But the truth is, these objects could all be hoaxes, but the real things are very possible. Now, if you understand physics of electromagnetic theory and the presentation of real electromagnetism, you can see that this object could possibly be real and that it could possibly be there, and it would be very easily assumable or presumably possible for our ancient people that existed here before we did had this level of technology. It's quite easy to assume that, especially when what we hear existed in Atlantis and what we hear existed in Egypt. Wireless lights. I mean, come on. And it's not very hard to understand that it wouldn't take them long to figure out resonant frequency, especially if they were thinking in that frame of mind, not from what we were thinking using physicality as a nature of being. Understanding the metaphysical is more important than the physical because you understand the physical by the metaphysical. Now, with the metaphysical being used in that manner, in which it would not be far or a huge leap to assume that they could also use this technology to their advantage and may have even left the planet or left the realm of existence at this time using that same technology. Where they're headed or where they're going, I don't know. But the use of the object is presented here. The use or intended use of the object was presented in film. Now, the actual use of the object has still yet to be seen, but it does exist, at least in that portion of the sky, at least in this depiction of the photograph that I've seen on Mr. MB be 333's video posting of it through this woman's picture. Now, it's a lot to chew on, a lot to digest, but it is possible. Now, the reason I say it is possible is because of my knowledge of EM theory and EM field existence and resonance, especially with rather normal minerals and presentation of highly conductive metals. So, yeah, very possible. Anyway, have a good one. This has been Science Monday, actually. Thank you. Sorry about that. I pre-recorded this one, and it's going live, and I forgot. I changed my script to Monday, not Friday. Have a good one.